Throughout the last several years, Venezuela, once the richest country in South America, has been hurtling toward economic, social, and institutional collapse. This has triggered a regional humanitarian crisis and an immeasurable migration crisis in its neighboring countries. The current situation has affected millions of people and families around the world, and according to the UNHCR, there are now over 7 million Venezuelan refugees and migrants, and over 1 million asylum seekers worldwide, making it one of the largest displacement crises ever seen. Venezuela is not only undergoing a social crisis, it is also going through economic and political instability. The central bank no longer publishes economic data, so the exact levels of inflation in 2023 are unknown. But since 2015, levels of inflation have ranged from 121% to 65,374% per year. Not just this, but more than 90% of the country's population lives below the poverty line, unable to meet basic food needs every month. So now you might wonder, how did the country go from this to this? Venezuela holds the world's largest supply of crude oil. To understand how the country got to the point it is in now, it is important to go back a few decades when this all began. In the year 1998, Hugo Chavez was elected president. At that time, a little over half of the population was under the poverty line. Annual inflation was a bit over 30%, and oil prices were at a steep decline. He appealed to the poor, and people loved him. He promised to get rid of corruption, help the poor, and reduce the power of elites, which he blamed for the economic inequality. He was a charismatic and beloved leader. In 2004, oil prices surged to over $100 per barrel, and Venezuela's oil-dependent economy started booming. Chavez went on to spend billions of dollars on social policies and programs. He used the oil revenue to bring social change.
De darle poder al pueblo y especialmente a los más pobres, a los más débiles, para que se levanten. Esta nuestra opción de construir un modelo económico desarrollado, moderno, productivo, diversificado, desarrollar al país.
Which caused the economy's dependence on petroleum to deepen. As oil prices went up, the government spent all its revenues. And while this approach was sustained for some years, it all started to go downhill in 2013 when Chavez passed away. He had appointed Nicolas Maduro, a former bus driver and syndicalist, to take over the presidency. And that was when all the problems in Chavez's political system began to unravel. In 2014, the economy was doing poorly, and in that same year, oil prices fell. This was when all the social problems began. Scarcity was overwhelming the country. Basic products such as milk, rice, sugar, and toilet paper could no longer be found anywhere in the country. And people began protesting and going to the streets to ask for change. Unfortunately, the government had a violent approach towards these protests, killing over 100 people and hurting hundreds. The collapse of the economy that began in 2014 worsened in 2015, and it has gone in a downward spiral in the past years.
Protests on the streets of Venezuela turning deadly after President Nicolas Maduro declares victory.
The violence on Sunday, very real. The bomb went off near some motorcycle police, wounding several.
Election day clashes between protesters and police claiming at least 10 more lives.
The economic crisis has had many detrimental effects, including food and medicine shortages, rising unemployment, power cuts, violence, and hunger. Venezuela currently has the second highest crime index in the world. And as I mentioned before, the majority of the population is unable to meet basic food needs. This is what caused 7 million Venezuelans to leave. We all had the same hope of building a better future elsewhere. When thinking of a country with less than 30 million people, 7 million makes up over 20% of the entire population. And these people are now part of the Venezuelan diaspora. The Venezuelan migration and refugee crisis came to be known as the Bolivarian diaspora. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or UNHCR, around 5,000 Venezuelans leave the country every day. Most of them travel on foot without really knowing where they will wind up, but they go anyway with the hopes of a better life for themselves and their families. Their main destinations are Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. Most people leave without a concrete plan of what they will do once they get to their final destination. and the majority have an illegal immigration status, which takes away their opportunity to find jobs in the areas they used to work in while living in Venezuela. This was the case for the majority of my family. My aunt, for example, is a dentist, and she had her own clinic in Caracas for more than 20 years. However, in 2017, following the second wave of violent protests and the peak of insecurity in the country, she decided to move to Florida with my uncle and cousins. They stayed at a friend's house while they settled in the US, and my aunt found a job providing cleaning services since she could no longer work as a dentist due to the country's restrictions. Not only this, but as an immigrant without a legal status to work, those that did hire her paid less than minimum wage, since technically she was not allowed to be working. Language has also been a huge barrier for them, since they spoke little to no English when they moved, and adapting to a new language and culture has not been an easy task. This is something they continue to struggle with until today. Nowadays, my aunt and uncle own a small food stand, and they work every single day starting at 4:30 a.m. They applied for asylum in 2017, but have not received any response yet, nearly 6 years later. Since they filed for asylum, they're not allowed to leave the US, so all expectations and hope to be reunited with the rest of the family, scattered across the world, have slowly faded away. Initially, they thought their exile would be temporary, but after several years, it seems that the rift between them and their true home only grows larger as time goes by and no progress is made. The lifestyle they have in the US is far from what they used to have while they lived in Venezuela before the crisis began. But over the years, they have come to accept that they have to rebuild their sense of belonging in the place they now call home. As Edward Said states, they're continuously trying to overcome the crippling sorrow of estrangement brought by exile. People of a diaspora typically preserve and celebrate the culture and traditions of their homeland, and it is no different for those in the Bolivarian diaspora. Venezuelans are connected by a shared desire to return home. In reality, returning may not occur in any foreseeable future, but the longing for their lost homeland and the sense of belonging that they lack in the places they fled to becomes an identity unto itself. People are unified as they all have the same vision and dream for their country. They all hope that someday the corrupt government that has destroyed their beautiful country will be taken out of power, and that eventually all Venezuelans will come together to rebuild the nation. They dream of the day they will be reunited with their families to relive the moments they long for the most, those that bring nostalgic memories every time they think of home. For many, this means celebrating Christmas and birthdays with the whole family while sharing love through amazing Venezuelan food such as tequeños, arepas, tostones, and every other dish that makes the Venezuelan cuisine so enjoyable. While adversity has strengthened the identity of Venezuelans abroad, solidarity has kept them active and alive. Helping people has become a routine and a motivating way to stay connected to their homeland, whether it's hosting a friend or relative for a few weeks or helping family members that are struggling financially. The Venezuelan diaspora is a great example of the pay it forward philosophy, assisting those who have migrated and asking only that they support someone when the time comes. In the end, all Venezuelans invest in this effort for the same reason. They all hope things will change and that soon enough they'll be able to return home. The Bolivarian diaspora contributes to a more globalized world because we're diversifying and spreading our culture and customs to countries all around the globe as we try to find a new place to call home.